Thank you. John, thanks for doing this. First, just to follow up on the communique, even if you can't get into irreversible, the president's objection last year and Chancellor Schultz's objection, if I remember Vilnius correctly, was that neither one of them wanted a date set for fear, I assume, that the United States and its allies would be drawn into the ground war if Ukraine was still at war while a NATO member. Does that remain today to be his primary objection? Is he willing to do wording that just is short of a date? Because even if you do the word irreversible or not, it doesn't really change the meaning very much of what you published in Vilnius. And I have a second on just the level of...
Look, I'll make this simple but unsatisfying. Again, I'm not going to get into the text and the discussions about what the draft's going to look like, David. I think you can understand that. But I do think your question is important to provide some context to. The president still believes that NATO is in Ukraine's future. What that future looks like depends on an awful lot of factors. Right now, you got a war going on inside Ukraine, and the focus rightly's got to be on helping them win that war. And we are, as I detailed in my opening statement. Number two, for any country that wants to join NATO, any country, and it's an alliance of democracies, the democracies have to meet certain guidelines, particularly when it comes to governance. And we are and will continue to work with Ukraine on reforms that are necessary for any democracy that wants to be a member of NATO. And then the third thing I'd say is, you know, it's a unanimous vote. Everybody has to be on board with that, and that can take some time as well. So the focus is on making sure that they can win now, and that we can continue to work with Ukraine so that there is a path to NATO. The last thing I'd say is back to the bilateral security agreement that the president signed with President Zelensky at the G7 in Italy. I mean, we're one of many other nations that have done that too, because we know that whenever this war ends, however it ends, and whatever the border looks like, Ukraine's still going to have a long border with Russia that's going to need to be defended, and they're going to need the reassurance of being able to put forth a capable and competent defensive capability against Russian forces going forward, and that's why we're making sure that there are things in line to make sure that Ukraine can defend itself.
One follow-up on that. You mentioned that it was 10 years ago that the 2% GDP goal was set. Obviously, there was no war underway at that time, and so the entire security situation looks radically different than it did when that was set.
Well, I beg to differ. There was fighting in Afghanistan, and Mr. Putin invaded Ukraine in 2014.
But I think the 2% may have been set.
It was in Wales. It might have been set before the invasion, but nevertheless, it was still a tense security environment.
Right. We're in something much different today. I think we're all in agreement, just given the amount of arms
no argument
going in. So, is part of the president's message at this summit that 2% is in the rearview mirror, that the NATO allies are going to have to be spending significantly more than that, maybe double that, for some countries, some larger economies? Or is he going to stay away from numbers? I know it's politically sensitive with all of them. You mentioned the word win. I was wondering how you're defining that.
Okay, there's a lot there. The president's not going to set a new bar or a new level of GDP spending on defense here at this summit. The goal is 2%. It was a commitment everybody made 10 years ago. Not everybody's there. Most of the remaining nations that haven't reached 2%, most of them, not all, are working on it and are getting there. And so I think the president wants to focus on that. Wants to laud and commemorate those who have, but also make it clear that those who haven't still have some work to do. On win, I think we've been consistent about this. I mean, at least I think I have. I mean, we want all of Ukraine's sovereign territory respected, which means we want no Russian forces in any part of Ukraine by the internationally recognized boundaries.